about who Jospeh is. So Jospeh Smith is a PhD ABD. He is a qualified elementary, secondary, and post-secondary educator. He's the co-founder of the nonprofit organization Generation Chosen. Please go check it out if you haven't heard about it. It's an awesome, awesome organization. And Generation Chosen focuses on mental health and emotional intelligence within underserved communities. He's also a project coordinator for the Black Experience Project, which is also a very, very important project that took place, which is housed and funded by Environics Research Institute. He's the co-creator and co-facilitator of the Rooted and Rising Environmental Activism Program and sits on the board of Operation Black Vote Canada as the Director of Youth Outreach, another very important organization. So please, if I said that too quickly, let me know. We can drop it in the comments so you can all check out those organizations that are really there supporting Black youth. All right, so we will get into it without further ado. We'll get into our discussion for tonight, which is entitled Education, Mental Health, and Black Youth, a Christian Perspective. So we're gonna learn a lot tonight about things that we can do together as a church community to ensure that our youth are able to continue to be resilient and just to continue to push forward despite all of the trauma that we have, grown up with and continue to experience. So Jospeh, I want to start right away and just ask you if you can just share your story to all of our youth who are here with us tonight. We'd love to learn more about how you got into all of the amazing things that you're doing and your work around mental health and emotional intelligence.
Eunice, honestly, thank you, man. I love you, sis. Everything she says, for those who are listening, is absolutely correct. It's amazing how you can, in no time, feel like you know someone so thoroughly and they just literally become like family to you. And I'm sure that in the decades after these moments, we're going to be connected and going strong and doing great work together. And this is the next generation right here. So I'm so proud to see you thrive in your space. And thank you for that warm introduction, and hello to everybody. I'm so happy to be here with you all and to be of service in any way I possibly can tonight on this very important topic and these issues. My background as it pertains to all that I do right now. So I do everything that I do now by accident. No, it's all motivated by a long backstory and experiences that I've had that are quite unique, I feel, and I think others have recognized how unique those experiences are. And so let me just kind of go back to ground zero. I am a child of an immigrant. My mother came from Jamaica. She was a teacher in Jamaica for 11 years, and she came here in the late 80s and tried to get her career back, which I'm sure a lot of people here have stories similar to this, and she couldn't. And that's because they didn't accept her 11 years of experience and her qualifications from Jamaica. And so she ended up having, first and foremost, we were homeless in the Jane and Finch community for 3 years. And during that stint of being homeless, what was happening was that I was staying with babysitters, and my mother would be at York University trying to get her degree in Toronto so that she can then reapply to become a teacher here. And a part of the reason why we were homeless was because of my mother and my father splitting up. And it was due to some quite violent circumstances and conditions. And that impacted her mental health, which then contributed to the way in which I understand her and myself. And so she was working at Tim Hortons, going to school. She wouldn't get to see me a lot in the week. She gave me the babysitter. We finally got a place at 10 Eddystone in Jane and Finch. And I lived there for 11 years. Then we ended up moving to 2600 Jane Street. And then we moved to finally 2645 Jane Street. So I was born and raised in Jane and Finch for like 27 years. I didn't leave until I got married and started my own family. And so my roots in the community are deeply entrenched, and my presence, I think, is felt there, especially with the things I'm doing now. So a lot of my work right now is connected to finding ways to mitigate the racial trauma that often besets our lives and that impacts us existentially. And my PhD work primarily explores what the psychological ramifications are of false narratives. And so right now it comprises, my doctorate is in humanities, and it's interdisciplinary. So it comprises philosophy, religion, literature, and psychology. I interweave all four of those discipline areas to address this question and this concept. And my understanding of what a false narrative is any narrative that reduces you to your finitude. Finitude is just a fancy word for your material embodiments and the conditions of your reality, your social reality. And so that's a false narrative. Anyone who's speaking to you is saying that you are this and that it's completely in line with social conditions or, let's say, your physical makeup. That in itself is a false narrative. And I intend to expand my research and look at the neuroscience of the impact of false narratives to see what it actually does to the brain. And we're going to talk about the brain a bit more too as we get into some questions. But that's my research. And as Eunice already expressed, I'm qualified to teach in post-secondary sector. So I teach at York University and Tyndale University. So 1 course at York, 2 courses at Tyndale. I love Tyndale. Anybody thinking of going to Tyndale already there? Tyndale's amazing. I'll be back there in the fall teaching courses in the English department. And I am a trained teacher. So I'm trained to teach for everything from kindergarten all the way up to grade 12. And I currently, Tyndale's great, dope.
Yeah.
And I currently teach at Northview Heights Secondary School. In addition to my teaching roles, I do a couple other things that Eunice already expressed. One of those things is Operation Black Vote Canada. If you don't know what that organization is, the goal of Operation Black Vote Canada is to increase the representation of self-identifying Blacks within the political ecosystem. And so that position has me consult with federal leaders, provincial leaders of all sorts, municipal leaders. We were the first organization to put on the provincial leaders debate exclusively for the Black community. And we've put on municipal leaders debates, and we've been instrumental in connecting with federal leaders to kind of get them to recognize what they have to do to combat anti-Black racism prior to everything that we're seeing happening this summer. So that means we've met with Elizabeth May from Green Party, Jagmeet Singh countless times, Andrew Scheer, leader of the Conservative Party, because we're multi-partisan. We're not biased in any way, shape, or form. We're not partisan. And of course, Justin Trudeau, a number of occasions. One of the most recent occasions was the blackface incident that happened. We met with him personally on a number of occasions to help him navigate those murky waters, help him try to figure out how to regain connection with the Black community. And now we're gonna kind of hold him to task on that because it's time to pay up. We supported you in the election, and now you're going to have to figure out what to do to address systemic anti-Black racism. So we're in constant talks with his office, and I'll be meeting later this month with the Race Secretariat and the Youth Secretariat to kind of push some of these ideas forward more. So that's the political side. And Veronica Youth Institute. So something I want to mention about that, if you haven't checked out the research, check it out, www.blackexperienceproject.ca. It's not lengthy or robust in a sense of hard to read language. It's very relatable and very easy to engage and decipher. We're set to take the research project national. So it primarily looked at GTA specifically, and we addressed or questioned 1,500 individuals who identify as Black. And we asked a series of questions and gained some really rich data from that. And so now we're set to do it nationally. We're just waiting for the kind of government support, which might come at the end of this month. And that means we're going all over Nova Scotia, we're going to BC, we're going to the Midwest, we're going to Ottawa. And so we can have kind of like a large comparative study, the first ever of its kind in Canada. So it's an honor to even be associated with that project, but then now to know that it might go national so we can have a comparative understanding of what's going on. Incredible. And so, I also work now for Marneau Chappelle. And so Marneau Chappelle, if you don't know what it is, HR services, they hired me on to be a consultant and a facilitator in the areas of systemic anti-Black racism and emotional health. So a couple of clients of mine now are Jameson, Bell Canada, and General Electric. And the goal now is for me to get into those spaces, consult with them on what they need to do to address systemic anti-Black racism and the emotional health of their Black employees, and then have these kind of like listening sessions with Black employees to figure out what their grievances are, what they think the company needs to do to be better, and then meet with the senior team to present that information. So that's a bit of insider confidential information, but you just know I'm behind the scenes doing that kind of work as well. And so that's another part of my work experience. And I also, as Eunice expressed, I run my own nonprofit, which is a labor of love. And I did that before I did anything else. And that was started in 2016. And that nonprofit in the beginning, it was co-founded just by myself, my wife, and Dwayne Brown, my best friend, who is also a PhD in education. You can follow him too. He's a really great guy, really dope man. We started this program because we just wanted to create a space where we can have open, transparent conversation with other young Black men. We thought we wanted to open it up to women as well, but we knew that not a lot of Black men have space where they can openly express the things that they're feeling and dealing with. And I'm going to express why that's so important in a second. So we started off with 6 participants, and then this program out of nowhere in 4 years, just 4 years, blew up to where we have on a weekly basis 100 to 150 young people under 25 coming to engage our programming, coming to eat some good food, and coming to play games and experience some mental health first aid and gain connections to other things that can help them in their professional lives. So in that program, we operate thematically. So we operate for 7 months out of the year, and each month has a different theme, and the themes stay the same. You can see it on the website. So it's like fear, hatred, compassion, love, anxiety, stress, vision, trust, things of that nature. And so that's our curriculum, and we've built curriculum documents to supplement all of our offerings. And if you come to our program, what happens is you go through 45 minutes of an emotional intelligence seminar run by myself and also AITs who were training to be like the main facilitators. AITs stands for Anchors in Training. And so we call ourselves anchors in the community, and we call our understudies who are 25 and under, so between 18 and 25, they lead as well. They're called AITs, and that's a paid position. And then beneath them, we have participants, and we call them Ankies. I kind of jacked that terminology from an all-Jewish camp that I actually worked at when I was 21. You can ask me questions about that through email or through social media if you want to know. But yes, I was the only Black face in an all-Jewish camp for 2 years straight. And so I saw how that camp operated and how it ran things and how it increased engagement. And I jacked that. And I was like, you know what? My neighborhood needs this. My community needs it. Hopefully one day we have a camp of our own. Jewish camps are fun. Yeah. And they have money to do things that I've never thought could be done in green space in cabins. Anyways, it was living like luxuriously, right? So anyway, Generation Chosen's been running for 4 years. 3 years of those 4 years were unfunded. So I put up about $30,000 of my own money to run this program, and Dwayne Brown, my wife, has put up money as well. And now we're in a position where an employee can make $30,000. So God has been good to us at that program. It's amazing the kind of donations, sponsorships, grant opportunities that have come our way. And literally all the money goes back to the kids. Growing up in the neighborhood, I saw a lot of nonprofits come in and out of Jane and Finch, and a lot of individuals who are a bit more opportunistic, and they used the photo opportunities to garner resources for themselves and for their pockets. And I suffered because of that, and a lot of kids I grew up with suffered because of that. So things like that emotionally impacted me to the extent where I was like, if I can get to an age where I can have authority over something like this, everything's going back to the kids. And we just recently gave out $5,000 in scholarships, money to invest in stocks, money to start someone's own business. And so we're really serious when it comes to giving back and financially and emotionally enhancing the lives of young people across the GTA and hopefully one day across Canada. So why a program that focused on emotional intelligence and mental health? It goes back to a number of experiences I had growing up. So aside from growing up in Jane and Finch, where you're constantly subjected to police surveillance, being racially profiled. The first time I was racially profiled, I was 6 years old. And a cop came into my building at Eddystone. I was playing in the courtyard with a friend. And that cop pretty much said, you fit the description of something, or we're looking for somebody that looks like you. Can you give us your address, your information? And I was happy because when you're in kindergarten, you see storybooks of firefighters, police officers, and teachers and doctors, and they all have smiley faces, right? So I was like, oh my God, a man in uniform, let me divulge whatever I possibly can, because here's a professional. I want to be close to this professional. Little did I know that he was just profiling me just in case when I become a teenager, he would know where to look for me if I ended up joining a gang and doing something wrong in the eyes of the law. So aside from being racially profiled, aside from having to deal with gun and gang violence all my life, I was a teenager when the year of the gun happened. A lot of my good friends were involved in some of the issues pertaining to the year of the gun on account of safe schools policy, which maybe we'll get into later on, because safe schools policy on the ground level was thought of as zero tolerance. So if you come to school with a bandana or a wave cap or a head wrap, you can get suspended or expelled. And a lot of my friends were victims of that. So they ended up going onto the street and doing other things. So aside from those things, my most profound problematic racial experience that created racial trauma for me and impacted my mental health and pretty much set me off on the trajectory I'm at now, where a lot of my work is motivated by past traumas, was an experience I had where when I was 18, I took a backpacking trip. I took $5,000 and I went around Europe. And so how I got that money, I was considered an at-risk student in high school. So when and it was because of systemic anti-Black racism, my teachers thought I was just a dumb jock, even though I was doing really well in school. And I didn't realize, but I was responding negatively to the conditions of the school system. And so I would skip school, act out, things of that nature. Anyways, I was just fed up with school. I hated it, but I had one good teacher. And this teacher got me involved in a program called the ACE program. And what the ACE program did is it takes at-risk young people, brings them up to York University, gives them a chance to sit into a first-year university course and take that course from grade 11. So they're like 17, 16 years old. And if you do well, you get scholarship money. So I made sure I got an A+ in that bad boy. And I ended up getting $12,000 for my first years at school. And think about it, back in 2007, 2008, tuition wasn't 7 G's a year. Tuition was $3,000 to $4,000 a year. Yeah. So I had enough money for 2 years and then some. So I'm like, you know what? I want to do something spectacular. I want to do something different. I know people are going to ridicule me or think this is crazy, but I'm like, I want to backpack around Europe. A lot of the authors I was reading at the time, a lot of philosophy, a lot of psychology, they were European primarily because I wasn't exposed to the Black philosophers and the Black psychoanalysts that I am now. And so I was like, I want to see where these people live. I'm so inspired by their work. Let me go visit. So I went on this epic 2-month backpacking trip. I started off in England where I have family. Then I went to Paris, Belgium, Amsterdam, Berlin, Munich, Switzerland, all over Northern Europe and Southern Europe. And then I said, you know what, I want to go to Greece because most of the philosophers I was reading about are from Greece. And so I went to Athens, had an amazing 7 days, and I was set to now go to Rome because who goes to Europe and not goes to Rome, right? So I wanted to go to Rome. I went from Patras, which is a port city, and I was taking a ferry from Patras to Ancona, Italy, and then I was going to catch a train to Rome. And when the ferry ride is 24 hours, and I was traveling with a bunch of Australians and New Zealanders at the time, about 5 in total. We had a great night, chilling on the ferry, having fun, making jokes, and then we get to Italy and we're exiting the ferry, and all of them exit before me and they go unchecked through the guards. But when I get to the guard says, "Where's your passport?" So I look on my body and I can't find it. And so what they ended up doing was bringing me back onto the ferry, going through all of my stuff, and then saying, well, you know what, it's not here, you don't have it on you. They ended up handcuffing me to a railing on the ferry dock and sending me back to Greece, 22 hours handcuffed. At which point, when I got to Greece, I was met with 2 police officers. And in my mind, my very naive and idealistic mind, I thought that these police officers were going to take me to the Canadian Embassy. So I get off the ferry and they say, oh, they smile and say, who are you? I'm like, oh, I'm Jospeh Smith. And like, where are you from? Like, Toronto. I go to York University. I'm studying philosophy. I'm so happy to be here. And they're like, oh, that's really nice. And then they put me in the back of the cop car and they drive me to an illegal immigrant jail cell. And so they put me in front of their chief of police. And the chief of police looks me up and down and tells me to strip. So I end up having to take off my pants and my top, and I was in my underwear and a marina. And then he says, what's your name? And I say, Jospeh Smith. And he's like, huh? I'm like, Jospeh Smith. He's like, what? And what I found out is that he didn't believe I was Jospeh Smith because Jospeh Smith is the widest, most generic name I could possibly have. It seemed as if I was a Mormon, but I must have just found that on the internet and, typed it in. And so he said I was an African running away from Africa. So he then threw me into an illegal immigrant jail cell, and I ended up being wall to wall with 40 other men, all older than me, who have been in this system for a long time, from Morocco, China, certain countries in Africa. And what ended up happening was that I was there for 5 days, and I was supposed to be there for 3 months because that's how long they take in illegals. And they have a bit of an underground economy in Greece, in the jail system. So they take in illegals off the street, and then they take all the money that the illegals have made on the street, and then they put them back onto the street, and then let them make some money, and then take them back in and take that money from them. And they take the money through just first taking it off your person, but also charging you to eat one meal a day. And the one meal a day that I had is like spaghetti and some moldy sauce. And so I went in there terrified, completely shocked, couldn't believe what was happening to me. I was quiet. I cried at nighttime. I met this one guy named Abdul, and Abdul was from Morocco. And he said to me, you know, on the fourth day, he said, you know, if you're sick, they'll let you out so you can call somebody, maybe get help or something. And so I ended up thinking that maybe I should fake an asthma attack because they were smoking cigarettes in there and I had asthma as a child. So I faked this incredible asthma attack, turned into a panic attack, and the police had nothing. They could do nothing but drag me out of there. So they dragged me out, handcuffed me to a chair in the chief's office. They called the hospital and the ambulance, got brought to a hospital. I got sedated on a bed. The doctor then said to the police officers, well, he must be reacting to the smoke. You can't keep him in there. He could die. You got to put him into a separate cell. They brought me to a different cell, just as crummy and ugly. But because that cell was a bit more expensive than the one that housed 40 men, they released me onto the street and said, I'm blacklisted from Greece. I can never come back. And I guess they were afraid of the international repercussions if it was true that I was Canadian. And so I begged for some money to go back to Athens, got to the Canadian embassy, and I called my mom, and I ended up coming home. And for 2 weeks when I got home, I couldn't leave the living room couch. I couldn't leave the couch because my apartment in Jane and Finch looked exactly like the cell in terms of length and width. And so in my mind, I was constantly reliving the experience. And that was my experience with racial trauma, right? So aside from all the things I had grown up experiencing in my own local neighborhood, which was itself traumatic, like seeing the passing of certain friends because of gang violence or police brutality, I then went trying to escape my environment and expose myself to something different and getting told that you have a place, young man, and that place is back in the same neighborhood that you were. It's not here. That was kind of what the message that resonated with me. And so my racial trauma manifested not so much in depression and anxiety at first, but in the form of neuroses. And neuroses is just having obsessional, compulsive thinking about something. So for example, I'd have one nail that wasn't clipped perfectly. And because my mind was trying to block out the traumatic experience, I would obsess over the one nail. And I wouldn't cut it, but literally just keep thinking about the fact that this one nail is jagged. That's just an example. And I wouldn't be able to read, eat, think, sleep because I'm obsessing over the shape of this nail and being unwilling to do anything about it. That's kind of a one way racial trauma can manifest in deleterious mental health states and then affect your life outcomes existentially, right? And so that experience, once I found the ways to get over it, and we could talk about that with the Q&A, that experience motivates every single thing that I do now. And it's why I probably have a surplus of energy when it comes to engaging with all the different areas that I engage with. And people are like, when do you sleep? And it's like, I always feel like I'm on borrowed time. And I know a lot of Black men and women feel like that on account of living in a context that's systemically anti-Black, but I really feel that way because I really could have died multiple times in my earliest days. And that kind of trauma, it stays with you. Even though I know how to manage it and contend with it, that stuff stays with you and it doesn't go. And my faith has been one of the greatest anchors for me when it comes to navigating this world in light of something that I knew I'd always keep encountering, but I couldn't let the triggers of what I kept encountering bring me back and make me regress to a state where I'm on my mom's couch and I can't move. And so a lot of different tactics I've been able to employ to deal with my own mental health issues and also help serve other people. But my faith is a big part, and my faith definitely finds its way into my PhD work and the kind of true narratives I want to explore and their psychological ramifications in the future with my PhD. And so I could keep going, but I just want to make sure we have time for Q&A. I don't know. What do you think, Eunice? There's always other things I can pull up. So
yeah, if you want to share an additional point, that's fine, and then we'll get into our Q&As. I see some questions coming in already.
I bet I don't see them, so I didn't look at the chat.
So I'm just going to give everyone the heads up. Once Joseph is finished sharing his story, we do have some questions that we will ask, and then we will also allocate some time for the Q&As from everybody that's on the line.
Perfect. So two things I wanted to touch on in relationship to my work with Generation Chosen. and how that filters into other work that I do. I leverage all of my personal relationships to create more opportunities for the young men and women that I serve within the Jane Finch corridor. And also my goal is to expand Generation Chosen as a model that can go into different underserved communities and eventually indigenous communities to do some of the work of unpacking some of the traumas that are historic. Mm-hmm. And again, unpacking those traumas. At Generation Chosen, we see ourselves as interrupting intergenerational cycles of poverty and trauma. And one way to do that is you can alleviate mental health issues by enhancing someone's emotional intelligence. There's no quick fix to this thing, but it does require a different type of aptitude that for Black communities is rarely spoken about. But in general, from a mainstream systemic educational sense, there's no curriculum on emotional intelligence. There is only one school in the world that I know of that, it's not a school, it's an online school that has inspired me because of my own personal interests, and that's the School of Life. And my goal with Generation Chosen, at least the for-profit leg of Generation Chosen, is to create culturally relevant and responsive emotional intelligence courses and videos to kind of help individuals from my community across the globe that need that emotional intelligence training so they can continue to navigate a system that is not set up for them to be emotionally healthy, which then, of course, affects two big things, their work life and their relationships. And it's the two things you need to go hand in hand to actually live a life that you feel is successful and valuable. You need your work experiences to be meaningful, and you need good, strong relationships, friendships, and intimate. Mm-hmm. And so the experience I want to highlight one thing, and it speaks to my ability to deal with the young men that are dealing with gun and gang violence, and the young women too in my neighborhood. My earliest memory of someone passing, unfortunately, was the leader of the Crip gang in my building of Eddystone. And I actually saw him get shot at the corner store in one of those Bell payphones back in the day. I guess you guys are too young probably, so.
No, we remember that.
Okay, I'm an 89 baby, so when I was 6 in the 90s, they had these Bell payphones outside. You put a quarter in and you can call somebody. I saw him get shot, and from there, I've ended up seeing a lot of other young men that I was friends with be shot by either police officers or by people that look like them. All of it is a symptom of systemic anti-Black racism, though. Often people try to say, oh, well, we got to stop the Black on Black violence if we're going to ever talk to other individuals who kill us. And it's like, no, it's all a product of systemic anti-Black racism. My hatred of myself, my hatred of people that look like me, my hatred of anybody else, itself is a symptom of systemic anti-Black racism. So it's that experience that helps me deal with a lot of the young men that come to me that are traumatized by gun and gang violence. And one thing I wanted to also highlight is that this issue that we're dealing with right now with systemic anti-Black racism, both in our school systems and then in wider society at large, it's so pressing and it's so timely. And it's not, some people are like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. It's all happening right now. And I know all of us here on this call know that, no, it's been always happening. But here's the irony of something. When we released the Black Experience Project in July of 2017, it was July 13th, I think we released it. Mm-hmm. The month before that, June 17th or 13th, I was taking a set of young men and women from my nonprofit to go paintballing to let off some steam. We're gonna go have some fun and play around. And that day I picked up 8 young men, and one young man that I picked up had his own paintball gun, and I picked him up at McDonald's, the McDonald's in Jane and Finch. And he was standing outside with a backpack on. He looked obviously like a 12-year-old, and he was brandishing his gun, but it wasn't showing it. He's just standing up straight, and he had his fake AK rifle lookalike gun, and there was an air bubble at the side of it, and that air bubble demonstrated that this is not a real gun. It's just air, and it's just like you put water in there. He came into our car, and someone in McDonald's called the cops on us. So I didn't know this. So the cops ended up tailing us on the highway. This is a month before the Black Experience got revealed. And in the Black Experience, it talks about how 75% of our respondents under 24 have been stopped by police or aggressively dealt with by police. So we're driving on the highway going east to Scarborough to play paintballing. And we get pulled over to the curb by a van, undercover cop van. The moment we get pulled over, the individuals in the undercover cop van come out and they brandish their guns. So there's 3 men waving guns at my face because I'm the driver. And then 4 other cop cars pull up behind the van that I was driving, and they all stop and surround us. And so what ends up happening is that 5 police officers open the doors and they take out the young men that I was carrying. I think I had 5 in my car at that time. And then 6 other police officers come to the driver's side door. They open it up, and I have 6 police officers with guns pointed at my face. And they're shaking. I'm not shaking. I walk out calmly. I know that I'm gonna have to disarm their preconceptions by being very respectful, very courteous, and very thoughtful. So I smile, I walk out, and I say, "Is everything okay, officers?" And they're shaking with their gun pointed at my face. And the other young men immediately are put down on the ground, and they have knees in their back and in their necks, just like what happened with George Floyd. And they get handcuffed, and these men are all under 18. And then they proceed to handcuff me and bend me over the hood of a cop car. And I'm looking towards the road, the actual highway. And what I'm seeing as people are driving by is people are looking at all of these black men in a car getting stopped and shaking their heads, right? And in that moment, that hit me so hard, because all it does is reinforce the negative ideations I possessed when I came out of that illegal immigrant jail cell and my experiences growing up. And so because I was more mature, I was 27 at the time, I was more mature than the young men dealing with me, I knew that I had to demonstrate in the moment how to be emotionally intelligent and how not to let the conditions of our reality dictate the narrative we recast about ourselves. And so I had to show that to them, that this doesn't faze me. And why? Because they're being motivated, and the catalyst for their actions is prejudice and ignorance. And that we shouldn't allow that to dictate our view of ourselves. But for a young person whose prefrontal cortex isn't developed yet, so they can't make proper rational decisions yet, and all they have is emotional reactions in the back of their head, they're receiving this information and storing it as truth, and not recognizing that there's ignorance and falsity behind these actions. And that's the goal of what we try to do at Generation Chosen. We try to show them that how you're being treated does not dictate or recognize your actual worth and who you are as a person. So it's hard work, because these experiences, like the one I experienced at 27, 28, demonstrate that it doesn't matter how many degrees we have, doesn't matter how many connections I have, doesn't matter what kind of car I drive, I could easily lose my life any day that I step outside on account of the appearance that I possess, and all sorts of other microaggressive behavior that then, get created and turned into aggressive behavior that's macro and explicit. And so, yeah, I can keep going, Eunice. So I lecture for a living.
No, that's all.
Sorry.